Rush Duels are coming to Duel Links. This hasn't been officially confirmed, but it feels like it's almost all but confirmed that Rush Duels are in fact coming to Duel Links in the form of a new Duel Links world, Sevens World. So Sevens World is obviously going to be based off of the Yu-Gi-Oh! TV series Yu-Gi-Oh! Sevens, which is all about rush dueling. It would be weird to introduce a Sevens World, which is all about rush dueling, and not have rush dueling. The Duel Links has its own set of rules. It's a lot more similar to Master Rule than any other format, or I suppose Speed Duels, but very different from Rush Duels. Now, Rush Duels has a lot of similarities to how Duel Links plays, but not really the same. So what are Rush Duels? So Rush Duels are a spin-off game of Yu-Gi-Oh! Which has its own anime season. In fact, it now has two of them. We have Yu-Gi-Oh! Sevens and Yu-Gi-Oh! Go Rush, which means if Sevens gets introduced, that means Go Rush could be introduced later. But sticking to what Rush Duels are at the moment, in Rush Duels, you draw up to 5 cards each turn. So if you have 1 card in hand, you will draw 4 cards. If you have 0 cards, you will draw 5 cards. If you have 5 or more cards, you draw 1 card. So you will always be drawing at least 1 card during each turn. You have 8,000 life points and 40 card decks, which goes in direct contrast to how Speed Duels and Duel Links work, where you have 20 to 30 card decks and 4,000 life points. So this is already quite a big departure. You can also normal summon as many times as you want per turn, which means it is quite common in a game of Rush Duel to summon 2 monsters, immediately tribute them both off, summoning out a level 7 or 8 monster, and then maybe summoning or setting more cards from your hand, and just kind of emptying your hand as much as possible, because again, you'll be drawing back up to 5 cards, so the aim of the game typically is to empty your hand as quickly as possible, swarm the board to gain as much value by drawing a whole new hand next turn. So all effects in Rush Duels are soft once per turn. So each different monster can activate its effect once per turn, even if they have the same name, but they can only be used once, and that's not specified on the cards, that's just in the rules. So just once per turn is what you get. All effects have a clearly defined requirement. Now, sometimes that requirement will be none, so it's just, you can just use this, but all effects basically will tell you what needs to happen in order for it to go off. Sometimes that'll be milling a card, sometimes that'll be discarding a card, paying life points, sometimes there just needs to be a condition, like you need to have a face-up monster, something along those lines. In Rush Duels, there are 3 monster zones and 3 spell trap zones. This is very similar again to Duel Links and Speed Duels, so there is kind of that overlap, and that will work quite well on a phone. There are no chain links in Rush Duels. Effects must fully resolve before another effect can be activated. And finally, there is no main phase 2, which does mean, again, the same as Speed Duel, the same as Duel Links. You have to do everything in main phase 1, go to battle, and then your turn ends. So, what is Duel Links? Chances are, if you're watching this video, you've already played Duel Links. It's huge. But yeah, it's a unique Yu-Gi-Oh! Game that is very similar to Master Rule and Speed Duels. You use 20 to 30 card decks, and life points are at 4,000. The game introduces skills that change how decks can play. This can be things like adding in extra effects for anime style cards. A skill that I used to use a long time back in the day was a Mako skill that just let you start the game with Umi out. There are a lot of cards that work with having Umi on the field or need you to send Umi to the graveyard, things like Leviathan Dragon Daedalus, but also just a 200 point boost can make your kind of weak fish, Aqua and Sea Serpents a bit stronger, and that's kind of how I used it. But yeah, the general theme is archetypes that were maybe not as strong in the TCG are made stronger using skills and by using creative product releases. In Duel Links, they start with 4 cards in hand instead of 5, there is no main phase 2, and the card pool is different from Master Rule, with releases in a drastically different order, which again, really does shake up the meta. That does mean, like at one point, aliens were considered a meta viable deck, because the alien cards came out a lot earlier and in an environment where they could thrive. So the question is, how will Rush Duels be implemented? So the leak said Sevens World, but nothing more than that. They could try to incorporate regular cards and Rush cards together, similar to Cross Duel, but I think that would be rather off-putting. I feel like the Rush Duel fans wouldn't like that. I feel like the Duel Links fans wouldn't like that. I'm not really sure who that would be for. I think it would make a lot more sense to keep the 2 games separate, because what the Rush Duel fans really want is their own game. We want a Rush Duel standalone game. It feels like we're not going to get that, and this is kind of the closest thing we're going to get. The Duel Links fans, however, I feel don't want Rush Duel in their game because they feel it will take away from the game that they're actually playing, that they enjoy playing, and that is very understandable. It would suck if basically development time was taken away from regular Duel Links to facilitate the Rush Duel game. In an ideal world, you'll hire a new team. That team will work on Rush Duels while another team works on the kind of rest of Duel Links. And also, it would suck if we started losing Duel Links events in exchange for Rush Duel events. but this is still very early, so we don't really know how this is going to go. But I think this is why a lot of people are very anti Rush Duels coming to Duel Links. So how will we be gaining Rush Duel cards? So this is an interesting one. So currently, cards are gained through character unlocks, boxes, starter decks, the card trader, and event rewards. This is a very interesting way to get cards. This does mean that, for example, they can soft limit the amount of cards that you have access to. So an example of this would be they could give you a character's boss monster as a character unlock reward at 1 copy. That will mean there is only one version of that card in the game. You can only get one of that card. It's not limited, but you can only have one. When they increase the level cap of certain characters, they can put those cards in as character unlock rewards later on down the path, which means they can artificially give you access to more copies of that card, thus kind of soft unrestricting it. So will they mix Rush and regular cards in the same boxes? This is very strange to me. I don't think you would do that. I think that would annoy everyone because for the most part, I feel like most Rush players aren't going to be as invested in Duel Links, and a lot of Duel Links players will maybe want to try Rush, but they won't want to spend their hard-earned gems on Rush cards. They won't want to try and get the cards that they are actually after and end up with a bunch of Rush cards. So this would be a terrible way to implement it. Let's just hope Konami doesn't go down this path. Will events give both regular cards and Rush cards? I would like to see parallel events. What I would like to see is every time there is a regular Duel Links event, we also have a Rush event going on at the same time. Both would give their own rewards. I would like them to not alternate between regular events and Rush Duel events because I think that would annoy players quite a lot. Basically, that would be like saying we're taking away some of your Duel Links events and replacing them with Rush Duel events, which I don't think anyone would be very happy with that. I mean, obviously the Rush Duel players probably wouldn't mind, but it's not about what I want, it's about what's good for the whole community. So, will they change Rush mechanics to make it more adjacent to Duel Links? This is a weird one. I feel like Rush Duel is in a really good position right now to just be a digital card game. The games don't last too long. Now, there are some exceptions to that. There are some Rush cards that have been problematic in the past. Games tend to drag on when specific decks and specific combos are being used. But for the most part, Rush Duels, like the name suggests, are quite fast. You play them very quickly, get through a bunch of games very easily, and thus I don't think limiting the life points or the hand size is really a necessity. If they did reduce the life points to 4,000 though, I feel like a lot of the burn effects would have to be halved. But also, Rush Duel is about getting to your opponent's life points. A lot of Rush Duel cards and a lot of decks are determined how strong they are by how easily they can get to your opponent's life points. This is through things like piercing, this is through things like multiple attacks, and this is through things like removal effects. Because if you're able to just get rid of your opponent's monsters, you can just attack them directly. Piercing is self-explanatory, gets at their life points, and then attacking multiple times, again, clear all the monsters, attack them directly. One of the very earliest cards released was Multi-Strike Dragon Dragius. This is a card that when it kills a monster can attack again. So this means immediately you would have a way to attack 3 monsters and then attack them directly for 2,500, which is immediately almost the game. If you got out 2 Dragius, you could just end the game in 1 turn, which is probably not really what we're looking for, because although we want it to be fast, we don't really want it to be that fast. We want at least kind of 5 to 7 turns, I feel, is kind of a good length of game to aim for. Next up, skills. Skills is a really interesting one, because especially in 7s, a lot of the early Rush Duel cards were quite bad. Basically, from release all the way until Go Rush, I would say that Dragon Casters, which is a lot of cards just from the very first 2 decks released, so the very, very first product release, was a fantastically powerful deck, and it was dominating tournaments. That means that if released in the exact same product release order, which again Duel Links typically doesn't, but if they were, people could just make a Dragon Caster deck very early and then slowly upgrade it over time, but basically keep the same core throughout most of 7's lifespan. So in that way, I would like to see skills come in to make some of the weaker decks a lot stronger. There are a lot of very interesting boss monsters that are just too weak. So 2,500 attack is generally what you're aiming for your 2 tribute monsters, and there are a lot of monsters which have okay effects, but their attack points are just too low to really make them usable. So I think a skill that could make their effects more viable or to make them easier to summon could potentially bring them up to kind of this dragons and spellcasters level, and obviously machines a little bit later on, and there are a variety of other decks that do crop up here and there, but for the most part, Dragon Casters is going to be a menace if left unchecked. So the only other thing that's really different would be hand size, which would mean limiting the number of cards down to 4. I think Rush is very well balanced at the moment around having the 5 card hand limit, and I think changing that artificially would kind of suck. Also, we don't really have a good way to play Rush Duels in the West. We can't play them physically, and we only have one of the Switch games which has barely any of the cards. So this would be a really good way to give Westerners a good chance to play with the Rush Duel cards without having to take a massive risk by working and developing a full standalone game, or by trying to print Rush Duel cards over here. I think this could be a good way to kind of get a taste to see if people like it, and obviously it's a lot less risky, I feel, than doing any of the other options, which is why I think they're doing it in the first place. So how can you prepare for Seven's World? Duel Links is an interesting game. You get gems, which is the premium currency, to buy in-game packs and decks and things. That is the primary way to get cards. There are obviously other ways, such as the card trader, events, and character unlocks, but for the most part, it's gems. We still don't know if Rush cards are going to be bought with the same gems, or if they're going to have their own currency. I like to think they will have their own currency, but if I got everything I would want, it would basically be its own game. So I'm not sure how far we're going to go with that, but just in case, I've stocked up on my gems. I have 9,999 ready to go. And 1 month before the update comes out, I will be playing, because any gems that you would get over 9,999 get put into your mailbox and then are deleted 1 month from going in there, which means any gems I have in there will basically be on top of what I already have. So I'm going to be fully stocked up ready for that. The only other potential problem is that Duel Links has multiple worlds, and some of those worlds have interesting unlock requirements. Now, obviously, I've already unlocked all the worlds currently there, so it shouldn't be too much of a problem for me. But I don't know if the Sevens world is going to have like an arbitrary unlock requirement, so it might be worth just jamming some Duel Links now, which the game is fun as well. So I would recommend just play Duel Links if you're excited for this anyway, because it's a fun game on its own. But hopefully they won't do this, and you'll just be able to access, like a fresh account should just be able to access Rush Duels, I would hope. But fingers crossed. So for the cards in the leak that have animations already, we have Seven's Road Magician. Seven's Road Magician is iconic. It is the main character of Yu-Gi-Oh! 7's Yuga's Ace Monster. It's a spellcaster with 2100 attack. Now that is its biggest downside. 2100 attack is terrible for a 2 tribute monster. But its effect lets you, during your turn, send the top card of your deck to the graveyard, and then gain attack equal to the number of different attribute monsters in your graveyard times 300. So it can boost itself up to potentially 3,900, which is pretty good. The other thing is, it is a spellcaster, and spellcasters get a very, very powerful trap called Dark Revelation, which lets you basically send 4 spellcasters from your graveyard back into your deck, and then it's Mirror Force. And Mirror Force, turns out, is pretty good. And when you can run 3 Mirror Force, it's also pretty good. So Seven's Road Magician is fantastic. Assuming the product releases are the same as the physical Rush Duel release, then Dragon Casters will be fantastic, or Pure Spellcasters will be fine, but for the most part, Dragon Caster is going to be the way to go. Then later on, when fusions are introduced, it will also make a comeback, because the Seven's Road Magician fusions are crazy. We get Seven's Road Paladin, which is a really, really strong card. We'll get Master of Seven's Road, which again, really, really good. And then further down the line, we will get Seven's Geas. Seven's Geas is playable to this day. So a card that came out not too long ago in Rush Duels is Seven's Wonder Fusion, which is a very, very powerful card and is probably the strongest deck in Rush Duel right now. So if you do get Seven's Road Magician early, know this card will be relevant throughout all of Rush Duel's lifespan. So fantastic pickup, and basically it's going to be top tier or like tier 2, tier 3 forever. So just know that Seven's Road Magician, great pickup. So, Seven's Road Magician's brother, Multi-Strike Dragon Dragius. This card, again, is fantastic. Has seen play pretty much throughout all of Rush Duel. So, 2500 attack, which is fantastic. You really want to hit that 2500. It's right where you want to be. Send the top card of your deck to the graveyard. If this card destroys a monster by battle, it can attack again. So, this is an effect that will come up a lot on a lot of the dragon monsters that are released in Rush Duels. The problem with those cards is they will say, when this card destroys a monster, it can make another attack on monsters this turn. So it limits them to not being able to attack directly. Multi-Strike Dragon Dragius is the only one that can hit direct for 2500, which is really, really big, especially in a game where your objective is just obviously to try and get to your opponent's life points. And obviously, in Yu-Gi-Oh! That's always going to be the objective. But in Rush Duels, because you can normal summon as much as you want per turn, your opponent can just set 3 monsters in defense and pass their turn. You need a way to break through that. So you need piercing, you need multi-attacks, you need monster removal. You need some way to get those annoying little monsters out of the way so you can get to your opponent's life points. So in the same deck that Multi-Strike Dragon Dragius came out in, another card called Phoenix Dragon came out. Very, very powerful. You can discard a card from your hand, take a level 5 or higher dragon from your graveyard, put it back in your hand. So Multi-Strike Dragon Dragius is also recyclable, which is amazing. And Phoenix Dragon, for that reason, is also going to be a mainstay forever. It is still used to this day in decks. Once again, just like 7's Road Magician, Dragius gets some very powerful fusions. Although the Dragius fusions aren't as relevant as the 7's Road fusions, I would still say they are very, very powerful, especially when they first come out. They'll be very, very strong. So again, there is a lot of versatility to Dragius, just like 7's Road. And to this day, again, Multi-Strike Dragon Dragius is being played in the 7's Wonder Fusion because you want to combine it with 7's Road Magician to make 7's Geass, but also it is used in Pure Glass Aggro, which is a deck that works to boost up your Multi-Strike Dragon Dragius attack up to 3500 and give it piercing. So double attack, 3500 piercing is pretty good. Next up, Prima Katana. Unfortunately, this card has not aged as well as the other two, but is still pretty good. It's a very fun card. It's a little bit harder to use as well because it does revolve around our life points. But we can pay 1000, then all monsters on your field gain 300 attack for each monster on your opponent's field. So pretty good AoE buff. Unfortunately, its attack is a little bit low, which just kind of suck. But it is recyclable with Roman pick, so there is some stuff you can do there. It also does get fusions later on, just like the other two, and those fusions are decent. And even to this day, does see some play, although it's more of like a tier 3 or tier 4 deck in Psychic Fusions. It's a very fun deck, and it definitely can take wins off of these stronger decks. It's just not as consistent and thus not played as much. Last but not least, Yammy Ruler, 2500 attack and 2500 defense, which is a ton. 2500 defense is huge in Rush. It has the ability to change itself to defense mode, and as long as it remains face up and in defense mode, your opponent cannot tribute summon level 7 or 8 monsters. So this is a bit of a floodgate. Obviously, it only works the turn it's summoned, so it's a little bit restrictive like that, but being able to have a 2500 attack monster and stop your opponent from being able to summon out their boss monster is very, very strong. Just like all the other cards here, it does get some fusions, and very, very powerful fusions. The main Yammy Ruler fusion basically can give itself a boost and stop your opponent from special summoning monsters in attack mode, which can stop most of your opponent's answers to itself. So it will be very, very powerful later down the line. It will be part of a floodgate strategy with another card called Prison Cell Block 5 and 6, which will stop your opponent from tribute summoning 5 and 6 monsters, as well as it stopping 7 and 8, which will lock your opponent down to not being able to tribute summon at all. And again, still sees play to this day in a different deck called Sky Saviors, which works all around the Celestial Warriors, which are fusion monsters. Again, if nothing is artificially changed, Dragon Casters will be the best deck for a very long time. So again, ways they could do this would be to limit the amount of 7's Road Magician, Multi-Strike Dragon Dragius, and Dark Revelation that we get access to in the form of like character unlocks by saying, you unlock yugioh, here you go, here is one copy of 7's Road Magician, and then later on give you another 7's Road Magician down the line, for example, or just do that with Dark Revelation. The other thing is Dragius, again, they could limit the amount you get of that, but I don't know if that would annoy a lot of Rush players, we'd have to see. And then going into the future, there are going to be loads more updates they can do. We have maximum monsters, we'll get fusion monsters, and then we'll get some equip spells. There are so many more archetypes that come out and get some support. So if this does come to Duel Links, which feels like it's all but confirmed, then I think it will have a very long, healthy life. So I'm very much looking forward to it. What I am really looking for is just a way for me to play with as many Rush Duel cards as possible, ideally get some sort of events that are supported for it, and be able to just queue. I think that's what I really want, is just the ability to queue, have a ladder system, much like the Rush Duel Switch game. I just kind of want to be able to grind ladder with Rush. I think that'd be very fun. Yeah, we'll have to see what happens in the future. Thanks for watching.